Welcome in. Today we're really diving deep into the life story of Scooby, a Scottish DJ and entrepreneur.
Hmm.
And his story, I mean, talk about highs and lows.
Yeah.
We're going to be uncovering his journey, how he's navigated bipolar disorder, addiction. And what's really fascinating is how he's found this grounding in mindfulness and resilience.
Really inspiring.
Yeah, and you sent over his talk, which, wow, hearing it in his own words, it's incredibly powerful.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
some articles and interviews. And one thing that just jumps out, this desire to be so open,
That's
sharing
right.
the triumphs, sharing the struggles. What stands out to you just from this initial look at his story?
I think it's that honesty,
Yeah.
the rawness. It's what makes it so compelling. He doesn't shy away from anything, and I think in doing so, it makes it okay for us to really look at those sides of life.
It makes it feel, it makes it feel accessible, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, this is a real human being. He's been through some stuff.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. Scooby grew up in Bannockburn, Scotland. I was like, I had to look that up.
Totals.
A place known for its historical battles, which feels kind of fitting.
Yeah, it does.
Even as a kid, like boundless energy.
I can imagine.
And you can see how that translated into his career DJing at 16,
Wow.
managing clubs, even some graphic design. There's this creative drive throughout his whole life.
You can see, I think, that energy initially linked to his ADHD
Yeah.
really fueling all of those different pursuits. It's like that inner drive was always kind of pushing him toward that creative expression.
Yeah, finding those outlets. And then as he got older, that energy kind of takes on a new dimension when he's diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Right.
And this isn't just mood swings.
Yeah.
Bipolar, it affects everything, the energy levels, the sleep, even like a sense of grandiosity. And for Scooby, immersed in the world of DJing,
Yeah.
those highs and lows,
Amplified.
totally amplified. I think it's important, too, to remember the context here. Scooby's coming of age in the 80s and 90s music scene. Mm-hmm.
Where drugs were often, I mean, they were intertwined with the lifestyle.
Yeah, very much so.
And he's very open about his own experiences, starting with cannabis at 16,
Mm-hmm.
and then later cocaine during his time in Ibiza.
Wow.
And, it's a part of his story, and he owns his choices,
Absolutely.
but it's also a reflection of the environment he was in.
Definitely. And I think it's a reminder of how much our understanding of mental health has evolved.
Mhm.
Back then, conversations about addiction, mental illness, much more shrouded in stigma.
Right.
And this link between substance use, I mean, cocaine specifically, and how that can really exacerbate conditions like bipolar, not as widely recognized back then.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how different things might have been with the knowledge we have now, the support system.
Absolutely.
And speaking of different, Scooby's life takes this turn. Imagine this. He's doing well professionally, making good money, and then boom, hit with this massive financial blow when the BCCI bank collapses.
Oh, wow.
And it's not just his savings, it's his father's life savings. Gone.
And this is where you see, even though it's tough, he talks about it in terms of his Bauer's philosophy, which we'll get into.
Okay.
But that responsibility piece, recognizing that, hey, sometimes external forces impact us,
Right.
but we get to choose how we respond.
Yeah. We can't control everything.
But before that, I think it's important to really not to gloss over the mental health struggles.
Of course.
He talks about multiple hospitalizations, even being sectioned, which for listeners outside the UK basically means he was involuntarily committed.
Right. Under the Mental Health Act.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct.
And that really underscores the severity of what he was going through.
Absolutely.
Each of those experiences takes a huge toll.
It's a lot to process.
And it is.
And that's where you see that even with those immense challenges, it's almost like that human spirit still seeking a way forward, like this kind of drive for survival.
Totally.
Like finding a way through.
And for Scooby, that path leads him to this incredible encounter with, he calls him a Japanese Cockney Buddhist.
Okay, interesting.
This individual introduces him to Nichiren Buddhism. Have you come across this in your work?
I haven't worked directly with anyone practicing Nichiren Buddhism,
Right.
but I have seen the positive impact of mindfulness practices in general.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to hear how this unfolds for him.
Yeah, and I think for folks who aren't familiar, it's centered around chanting and this idea of like actively engaging with the world
Okay.
to overcome challenges and create positive change. It's not just sitting there meditating. It's like, how do you take action?
Yeah.
How do you strive for personal growth? And this encounter, it marks a huge turning point in Scooby's journey. So we left off with Scooby finding Nichiren Buddhism. And it's interesting, he doesn't frame it as this like quick fix
Right.
in his talk. He's like, it wasn't like I chanted a few times and suddenly everything was rosy,
Yeah.
but it gave me a framework,
Mm-hmm.
a way to start rebuilding.
And I think that's key.
Yeah,
Right? Because so often, especially after experiences like Scooby's, people are looking for that magic solution. And real change, lasting change, it's a process.
It's a journey.
It is.
And Scooby's really big on like giving people practical tools, and that's where his BARS acronym comes in.
Yeah.
Be the change, awareness, responsibility, and support systems.
I like that.
Have you found, I mean, in your work, working with folks, that kind of structured approach, is that helpful?
Incredibly, because you're right. It takes these big concepts and it makes them actionable.
Right, breaks them down.
Yeah.
So let's unpack it a little bit.
Okay.
Be the change, and I'm thinking back to his talk where he quotes Gandhi, right?
Yeah.
Be the change you wish to see in the world.
Love that quote.
And Scooby connects it directly to being a DJ. He's like, if I wanted the crowd energized, I had to bring that energy first.
It starts with you.
Yeah, and it's the same with, especially with kindness and understanding, you know?
Absolutely. And that actually leads perfectly into awareness.
Yeah.
Because Scooby talks about how crucial it is to understand your own mental landscape.
Oh, and
What are your triggers? What helps you feel grounded? What are the things that really kind of set you off?
yeah.
And he's very open about his own cigarettes, not getting enough sleep, even social media. He's like, these are things that I know can
Wow.
throw me off. So he's asking, what pushes your buttons?
It's so self-aware.
Yes.
Yeah.
Once you know, you can start taking back control.
Like, that's the foundation, right?
Absolutely.
And then there's responsibility, and what I appreciate here is he doesn't frame it as blame.
Right. It's not about that.
It's about agency, you know? In his words, he's like, look, no one's making you get help, making you change your habits. That's on you.
You have the power.
But realizing you have that power, that's huge.
It is huge. And it goes back to what we were talking about before, that drive for self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
And Scooby highlights something so important here, and that's vulnerability.
Yeah.
He doesn't shy away from it at all. He actually says, being vulnerable, asking for help, that's not weakness, it's strength.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to learn that.
Such a powerful message. And it brings us to that last piece of BARS, support systems. And for Scooby, it's his partner V, his friends, family, even his psychiatric nurse.
Wow, so he's really built that network.
He has, and he talks about how vital it is to have people you can lean on who've got your back. But he also emphasizes that it doesn't have to be limited to just, you know, those closest to you.
Right. Your community can be broader than that.
Exactly. And that's where his practice with Nichiren Buddhism comes in.
Okay, also.
He's found this community that shares his values, that supports his personal growth.
That's wonderful.
And, you know, from a therapeutic standpoint, that sense of belonging, of shared purpose, it's huge for well-being.
Hugely important. We're social creatures. We need those connections.
We are. And what's cool is that he ties it back to those earlier points, be the change. He talks about how Nichiren Buddhism emphasizes taking action to help others, to improve your community.
I love that.
It's not just chanting on a cushion, it's bringing that positive energy into everything you do.
And that active approach, it can have such tangible benefits.
Absolutely.
It's like Scooby's tapped into this whole toolkit for well-being, talking therapies, mindfulness, even just going for a walk. We know these things work.
Yeah.
Mindfulness reduces stress. Exercise can improve your mood. It's all interconnected.
It's like taking those insights and turning them into daily habits.
Yes, exactly.
And I love this next bit. He talks about radiators and grainers.
Okay.
He asks the audience, who are the radiators in your life? The people who lift you up, who energize you.
I love that. I've never heard it put that way,
Right.
but it makes so much sense.
And then who are the drainers? The ones that you're just
I know exactly what you mean.
you just feel depleted.
It's such a vivid image, and it really makes you think about your social circles and the impact they have on your well-being.
100%.
Like, are we surrounding ourselves with more radiators or drainers?
Yeah.
And if it's the latter, what can we do to shift that balance?
Be intentional about who we spend our time with, who we let influence us.
Yeah.
And then he ends this whole section with, he calls it the 51% rule.
Okay.
Have you encountered something like that in your work?
It reminds me a lot of the concept of micro-progress in therapy.
Yeah.
It's not about these huge leaps. It's those small victories, those little wins, you know?
Yeah, and recognizing that progress, it's not linear.
Exactly.
He puts it so simply. All you need is a 51% day to be on top.
I love that.
It's not about being perfect. It's about striving to be a little bit better than yesterday.
Even just a tiny bit.
Even by 1%. It's pretty amazing to think how far he's come, you know?
Yeah.
From those intense highs and lows to a place where he's sharing this really insightful and practical approach.
It's really inspiring.
It is. And he tells this story toward the end of his talk
Okay.
that I think really highlights that. He talks about this psychiatrist he saw back in 1999 who, and I'm quoting Scooby here, called him the worst patient he'd ever had.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine?
Carrying that, yeah.
Carrying that with you.
And it just speaks to, I think, the power of labels,
Yeah.
even when unintended,
Yeah.
and the impact that they can have, you know?
On how you see yourself.
Exactly.
And Scooby, he didn't let that define him. He talks about running into that same psychiatrist
oh, whoa.
years later, after he'd started to really find his footing
Okay.
and being able to share his progress with this doctor.
Wow, what a moment
Right.
to reclaim that narrative.
Totally. And get this. A week later, Scooby hears from a friend who was at the hospital with that same doctor.
No way.
And the doctor apparently told the friend, you should use Scooby as a good example.
Wow, that's amazing.
Talk about full circle.
It is. From worst patient to being held up as this, like
Model.
the model, exactly, of resilience and growth.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Scooby talks about it in terms of turning poison into medicine.
I love that.
That negative label that he carried for years, it became a source of motivation. Like, look how far I've come.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
And it reminds me of that whole idea that even our most difficult experiences, they can be these catalysts for change.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about finding that strength to rewrite those narratives,
Yeah.
you know, to redefine what's possible.
And that's what makes his story so impactful, right?
It is.
He's not just sharing, he's giving us permission to look at our own lives, our own challenges.
And find those tools.
And find those tools for growth, for resilience.
And remember, it's okay to ask for help, to build those support systems. We don't have to do this alone.
We really don't. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into Scooby's world,
Yeah.
I'm left with this question, like, what if we all talked about mental well-being as openly as we talk about a cold or the flu?
Right. Like it's just a normal part of life.
Exactly. How much could we change the conversation?
It starts with each of us, you know,
It does.
being open, being vulnerable, listening with empathy without judgment.
Scooby's story reminds us that even in the midst of chaos, even in those really, really dark moments, there's always that flicker of hope.
Always that possibility.
There's possibility. And sometimes all it takes is one person sharing their truth.